Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
What stops it, right? That's the first question you always ask. So why was it good? What gives it issues? And then this next piece of how do we protect it or insulate it from the things that gave it issues?
Student of the game comes from the mindset that decrees we will be genuinely curious, constantly evolving, and obsessed with the process of learning and growing. I've often operated with the mindset that the game of football is constantly evolving, and we will either grow with it or become extinct. It is our expectation that we separate from those we have passed and to catch those that are still operating above us. This podcast offers a source for those that believe in constant evolution of their knowledge, individual craft, and overall intrigue in the game of football. I hope each of you can find one tool that can help improve your off-season process as you continuously become students of the game.
It's winter, and you can now get almost anything you need for the coldest months of the year delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a ski slope delivered, but you can get dish soap delivered. Sunshine, that's a no. But a bottle of wine, that's a yes. A snow angel, sorry, no. But angel hair pasta, Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol and select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
Welcome into the Student of the Game podcast brought to you by the Coach and Coordinator Network. We have another special episode here of the new Student of the Game podcast. And I have a special guest here that I got to meet through this whole knowledge exchange that is the coaching world right now that occurs a lot through Twitter and a lot of these podcasts that people are hearing. But the guest today I met directly through that, have built a relationship with. And I'm really excited to get to share his thought process on some of the topics here. That guest is the offensive line coach and run game coordinator at Southern Oregon, Tim Souza. Tim, how you doing, my brother?
Man, I'm doing great. And I really appreciate you having me on. And as you and I have talked about in the past, this is an awesome full circle moment. And that makes this really special because your episode with Keith on Coach and Coordinator is really what was the genesis of our whole relationship, is me reaching out and you getting back, and just really grateful for the connection, this podcast, and our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is what's really neat. Each year I go into it, a little bit bigger the circle gets. And it's obviously, Keith has done such a great job of putting out content that we've been able to take in, but then we've got to be involved in it. Now both of us are talking on his network right here about some football. But I always like to give just a brief, backstory to the listeners as far as, why you're on this podcast. We're going to share about your background in coaching. And obviously, you've gotten yourself into a really good position at a very highly competitive program where you guys are scoring points and whatnot. But to me, that first phone call, as we got to know each other, obviously, I think that you have a great knack for finding the type of scheme that needs to be implemented or you believe needs to be implemented. We have a lot of similarities in our thought process, but it goes beyond that. And the student of the game mentality is people that are seeking further knowledge. They're seeking understanding to go into what they're looking for. And the passion with which I heard in your voice every time that we talked is what really keeps drawing me back to always wanting to kind of pick your brain. It seems like it's weekly or bi-weekly with us that we're getting together, and that passion, that intrigue, you have a love for teaching. Those are the things that caught my eye, and simple phone call, but have kind of just gone through, and to me that represents what it is. This whole subsection of this podcast is about, is being a student of the game. So certainly I respect that about you, but I want to dive right into your background so people can kind of get to know who you are, and then we'll take that forward into some of the topics we got.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my coaching journey started while I was still playing. I played my college football at Humboldt State University. I grew up in the East Bay area of California, but something as simple as a volunteer role at a high school while I was living with my dad in Eagle, Idaho for the summer, Eagle High School, really sparked something in me that was taking me off the path I was on. I was on the path to be a strength conditioning coach at the college level and be in that game, and really dove into being able to get some exposure in the football side of things. And that going into the strength conditioning world at Humboldt State, working for Drew Peterson, gave me great insight into teaching and getting knowledge transferred, how people learn how to move, how people learn how to learn. And, I've been all over as far as where I've worked and what levels I've coached at. I taught middle school PE and was a high school football coach. I taught high school PE and ran a strength conditioning program out of a high school PE department. I coached for over 10 years in the Boise area at the high school level, was fortunate to be a part of 2 programs that competed for state championships, won multiple state championships at Rocky Mountain High School, multiple conference championships, got to be a part of some phenomenal programs and coach some phenomenal kids. I was really fortunate to be able to work with the U.S. national team and USA football. And that opportunity, when I was the head football coach for the U16 select team in the International Bowl against Panama, is really what led me into my first opportunity at the college level. I was able to select 2 coaches for that staff, and one of my great friends from Humboldt State, who's now a receivers coach at the college level, Sergio Allen, was my selection on the offensive side of the ball, and Joe Trochet, who's now the head football coach at Luther College in Cora, Iowa, was my selection to be my defensive coordinator. Joe was an assistant at a school in the MIAC at the time, and went on to eventually get the head job at Luther College. And I was fortunate that he trusted me to bring me on to be his offensive coordinator at Luther College in the winter of 2021. Our first season there was 2022, and we jumped right in, installed our system, and got to work with some phenomenal young men who trusted us. And we broke 3 school records on offense that year. We had won as many games in that year as they had won the 4 previous calendar years combined. We went on the following year in 2023 to be the #1 red zone scoring offense in the American Rivers Conference, one of the best conferences at the Division III level. And so I'm really grateful for all those opportunities that have led me to where I'm at now. At Southern Oregon University, as you mentioned, the offensive line coach, the run game coordinator, strength conditioning coach, and all of those things. But I realize that I have a unique journey, and we all have a unique path. And what we like to say is everything's training for something. And so I'm grateful for all the experiences I've had at every level, whether that be teaching 6th grade PE or, working with freshman football as a volunteer over the summer to being an offensive coordinator at the college level. They've all built me into the coach I am today. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, what I like about your background is that it's got a diversity of different opportunities, but I think that creates a diversity of skills. And to me, that type of background where you've experienced a little bit of everything to this point, I think that's going to help clarify your purpose. And I say that because I think there's a lot of guys, I think back to when I got into coaching that are in the midst of finding themselves in this deal. That's what I feel like you have done through the different experiences you've had. And I think what I really respect about you is that within those different experiences, you're always, it seems like, collecting data to help make the next season or situation even better. And, I would say you're a learner of learning. You're always kind of trying to dig into that. And so kind of putting that on display. The message behind the podcast is being the student of the game. When it comes to you thinking about that phrase or that idea, what does that mean to you, being a student of the game?
For me, the most important part about being a student of anything is you have to love discovery. You just have to love discovering new things. We're always chasing that aha moment, that light bulb, right? Some of the things that, we hear, whether it's on a podcast episode or talking to coaches or sitting there watching a game, whatever it may be, waking up at 4 a.m. to an aha moment and you got to write it down before you go back to sleep. That's what being a student of the game is to me. You truly have to embody a growth mindset. You have to be truly curious. And really at the end of the day, you have to be obsessed with the process of improving. And for me, it's always been, even as a small child, like my mom always jokes that my nickname in our family was Timmy Why Souza, because I was always asking what it was. And why is it like that? And I truly even see that in my own children. My wife and I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. And when I watch them, I take something apart and then put it back together and figure out how it all works. And they have that aha moment that embodies it more than anything. And for us, we always talk about we're trying to study and understand things well enough to be able to teach it to other people. Like the name of the game for us isn't how much knowledge we can acquire, it's how much knowledge we can acquire and then transfer, right? And for us, if we're in a coordinating role, we're trying to transfer that knowledge to the coaches who are going to go implement it in their position room. Or if we are a position coach, we are trying to acquire that knowledge to transfer it to our players who ultimately are the ones that are going to go play it, right? Like I joke with our guys all the time, I don't block anybody. Right? I don't go out there and block anybody on Saturday. That's up to them. I have to equip them with the why, the what, and the how to do that. And so at the end of the day, that's what I love about this subsection of the Coach and Coordinator podcast. But the Coach and Coordinator podcast has embodied this for a long time. Like we're lifelong learners, right? Like we're studying things that are old. We're trying to find the things that can be new. And really, as you and I have talked about, learning all phases of the game is what being a student of this game is all about. And one of my favorite stories about that is my very first month into coaching. I've graduated from college. My wife and I have moved out to the Treasure Valley, and I've got my first role at Eagle High School assisting with the receivers. And I'm going to go to camp with our football program to the University of Nevada, Reno for the football camp. And I'm a member of the JV staff at the time. And one of the JV coaches is getting married. And every other coach on the staff besides me is in the wedding. And it happens to be the weekend of football camp. And so me as a 22-year-old, real wet behind the ears coach is now sent to University of Nevada, Reno with the offensive install, the defensive install, and all these kids who are looking at me to call every play on offense, run every warm-up, run every period of drill work and teamwork and walk through. And I learned real quick from that week, like, I better know it all. I don't just get to know what the receivers are doing. I got to know what protections we have. I got to know where the quarterback's eyes start. I got to know who the running back's responsible for. In defense, I got to know what front we're in. What's the movement up front? What's the pressure behind it? What coverage can we play behind that? If we're bringing 6, how many do we have left? And are we playing man or zone? And so being a student of the game, truly learning all the phases of the game is part of that. And even to my time as a special teams coordinator at Rocky Mountain High School, when we won 2 out of 3 state championships in 3 years, the special teams aspect of this game has informed how I coach offensive skill players or offensive linemen. And so being a student of the game, those are the things that really embodies. And that's how we really live that out as coaches, in my opinion.
That's fantastic. I think for you had that JV coach experience where it all culminated really like, well, this is how much I don't know. Because that's kind of what happened to me, where it was like, I don't have like a pinnacle moment like yours, but I remember thinking like, I know nothing right now and I need to know everything. And I think that that's critical as a young coach to understand, is where you're starting, but where it's not about where you're starting, it's focusing on where you're trying to get to. And that's kind of what I've educated some guys getting their opportunities this offseason in new moments, that they're a little bit overwhelmed. They're great opportunities, but they're a little bit overwhelmed. I said, you're setting a foundation for what will become the mansion in time, right? And it's going to be that brick by brick. But I love focused on the acquiring and transferring info, which I really want to talk about, because I believe that the teaching element is at the longer I'm in this game, the best advice that I'm trying to give to these young guys is you have to have that passion for teaching it and truly focusing on that element of it, not just what you're learning, but like you said, you're trying to acquire, then transfer it. The transfer process, I think sometimes is a cop-out for people to say, well, we can't do this. But to me, at the end of the day, teaching is king, which I know you believe. But before we go there, so we got guys that have to understand where they're at. That was your JV coach experience, and then that pursuit of the what and the why. Okay, so something that may be obvious, but I think is intriguing. Now we have to have mediums to study this information. When it comes to mediums for you, can you just explain maybe what it is you use, but your process of how you're kind of looking at each of these different opportunities out there.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, there's so many medias. I mean, you got Twitter, there's clinics in person. You can go on CoachTube. You can listen to podcasts galore, connect with coaches. Like there's so many books, even DVDs, ebooks. Like these are all, you sound like dinosaur materials when I talk about, when I was a senior in high school, my dad gave me a book that was about the Nebraska football strength conditioning program. And like, that's one of the cherished resources I've ever had as I started to really dive in. And again, a moment of like, I don't know anything. I thought I knew, but I don't know. So, I mean, for me, as I reflect on the mediums I've used or currently use, I would say that all of the above, and I think it's not a challenge to find resources. There's an abundance, an avalanche of resources. It's the ability to vet those resources. And for instance, right, some of the books that I have benefited from greatly, right? Like I've gotten ebooks by guys like Josh Herring or Brent Dearman or James Vint or Dub Maddox, all guys that have been on this podcast. And I've got hard copies and ebooks from those. Very, very early in my coaching career, I was really fortunate to be able to attend a lot of clinics in person. And it was all through a connection. My dad was running rooms for the Northwest Sports School in Seattle and in the Bay Area. And I was able to just, as long as I could drive and get to them, I could stay in a room and I could go to these clinics. And it was strength coaches, track coaches, football coaches, offense and defense. So going to clinics, sitting there in person and just trying to acquire as much knowledge as I could. Websites like CoachTube, right? I mean, off CoachTube, I've even purchased Keith's courses on tempo and structure of an offense, X&O Labs, Exo Clinics, Glacier Vault, CoachTube, like you name it. But I would say the most powerful of all of those for me has been connecting with coaches. And so I've found that it's not so much the seeking of resources that has been fruitful for me. It's identifying a need, finding the people that do that thing best. That leads me to the resources those people have produced. And then after I have dove into those, I make sure I have some very, very pointed questions. And when I reach out to those people, I ask them those questions. And that's been the most fruitful for me. That's where the biggest aha moments and those light bulbs have come. I think about guys like Jason Phillips, who was on here when him and Coach Ratton were at Alcorn, or you, guys that I listen to the podcast and go, yeah, that's what we need. I've been searching for this. Do some research and reach out. I mean, even when I was at the high school level coaching and we'd go to camps at Boise State, or we go to camps at Idaho State or University of Idaho, like I would approach those coaches and I would ask them and they'll spend time. Like that's, I think, the thing that the younger I was in the profession, I didn't realize that coaches will give you their time if you ask, because we all love football. And if we get a chance to talk football, we're going to do it. Right. And so I'm grateful for all the coaches that I've reached out to that have spent time connecting with me, because it's grown me and it's helped give me ideas. I mean, shoot, you and I joke all the time. There's like every time we have a new idea, when we talk on the phone, it's almost like a rehearsal of like how we're going to teach it to the people that we're working with, whether it be coaches or players. And that all comes back to we remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, 70% of what we discuss with others, 80% of what we experience, but 95% of what we teach to others. And so that piece right there has always been like, oh yeah, how many times can I rehearse teaching this? So when it's time to really teach it to the people it matters most to, which are the players, we've got this thing locked and loaded.
Absolute gold right there. I just want to reiterate I always say young coaches, but I think it's just anyone that's out there listening. Like to me, the two things right there that are critical is in talking about hunting down that resource. It's understanding your need, finding the people, leading you to the resource, and then it's getting you to very direct questions. I think that for me, that is one of the best explanations that I've heard of how you get to the source of what you're looking for. But I think it all starts with understanding what your needs are. It's always good to be open-ended. You and I are going to take in stuff that we're never, not never, but we're not using currently, but it's because we like to look at it and study it and hear what it is. Knowing that when it's go time, like these are my needs for the off season in that order. I think that's big time. And then the second one that I've just recently discovered the importance of is the rehearsing and teaching. And you and I mean, we've given so many installs to one another that we'd have, a pretty dense playbook. But I know you're the same as I. Like, I'll do it anywhere, anytime. Like, somebody, hey, you want to hear about a concept? And to me, it's not trying to say how much I know. It's more, can I take this information to someone that has a blank canvas and in 45 minutes, can they understand this idea? And to me, that is something that all coaches need to really lean into, is that you should get reps in the off season on your installs. Like, we're asking our guys to lift and run and do all that stuff. We have to get reps. I think that's critical. All right. So big time stuff right there.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free Second Look review. Second Look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
Now, kind of going into some of these questions that we have that I think are always interesting. So when it comes to reviewing, last year's film breakdown in a given year, you have a unique circumstance that I really appreciate, going from being an OC to a run game coordinator and how to navigate that. But in general, when you're looking at last year's film breakdown, how does that influence that checklist or that need list that we just talked about? Like, how are you translating from, okay, this is what I see on film to this is what I need in our research phase?
Yeah, and we're actually smack dab in the middle of getting our off-season self-scout done here at SOU right now. But speaking to, years past and as we've gone through this process, really, for me, it's been about reverse engineering everything, right? It's like, okay, what did we struggle with or where did we fall short? And the most important question is why, right? And was it the scheme? Was it technique, which at the end of the day is a coaching problem? That's us, right? Was it personnel? Was it just Jimmy's and Joe's? Or we as coaches didn't put the right guys in the right spot to do what they do best? And what we found was really helpful, and the most streamlined way that I've been a part of doing this was we took each of those three categories, schematics, technique, and personnel, and we built huddle columns for each of those. And we graded each of them. And we gave them a plus if it was positive, a 0 if it was neutral, and really that's only the personnel that becomes a neutral, because it's either a plus or a minus with scheme and technique, and then a minus, obviously. And so we go through, and after we put in all the data, we go ahead and we rate these things. So like if we're watching, some of our inside zone work with, the RPOs attached, schematically speaking, okay, we had 6 to block in the run unit. Was the box 6 for the defense? Our running back makes +1. If at the time the ball is in the belly of the back, we don't have anybody within what we deem the box at that time that's an extra hat, the scheme is a plus, right? If we have an RPO breaking to space that the extra 7th hat to the box has vacated, that scheme is a plus, right? If we were running an RPO tag that doesn't beat the coverage they're playing behind the run system that they're fitting, well, then that's a minus, right? If we have a hard run called and the surface, we're running to a surface that's a 3-man surface and they have 4 on that side of the center, that's a minus, right? If our combos are not correct, if our steps and our angles are not correct, if our footwork from the running back is not correct, all of those things would be minuses. And so as we go through, we look for the trends. Like after we've gone through and watched and evaluated literally every snap of that concept, okay, where were the problems? Were the problems schematic? Because we need to do a better job with our offensive architecture if that's the case. Were the problems with technique? Okay, where was the technique breaking down? Why? What's the issue? What is the problem with personnel? Well, what are we doing in recruiting to where our personnel is not able to compete on Saturdays, right? And so then now we know what's the problem and how do we fix it, or at least close the gap. And then the next question is really what I was getting at when I talked about resources. Who does that best? If we're struggling with wide zone, who do we need to study and talk to that runs wide zone really well? If we are struggling because all of our quick game concepts are getting matched out, or our RPO tags aren't beating the coverage we're seeing, who does that best? Now it's ready, set, go. Let's go study that person, find every resource we can from that person, whether it's Twitter, YouTube, ebook, podcast. And then how do we get a hold of this person? And let's ask them and let's talk, because that is verbatim how you and I ended up connecting. It was in a journey where we were talking about, hey, our protections aren't holding up as well in the drop back game. We're going to need to major in more quick game. Also, we are running 6-man run units like split zone or GY counter into 6-man run fits from the defense, like a 4-2 box, and we're still inefficient in the run game. So when the majority of our, at the time, quick game throws were coming as an extension of the run game in the RPO world, well, now we're 6 against 6, the back makes 7, and they're still tackling us for less than 4. Well, we better invest in some true quick game. We had already gone into this world of like, all right, we're running, some of the Bryles type outside choice and inside choice in the deep choice world. And we already had that framework and that operating system, if you will, within our offensive structure. Well, what's the quick game equivalent of that? Because where we were at the time, we weren't just going to line up and run by dudes on a post or a go ball. We needed to give our receivers tools to break opposite leverage and break to space and go win by giving them tools post snap. So what's the quick game equivalent of deep choice? Well, it's the option game. It's the juke game. It's goof. It's slop. It's all the things that Caleb Coral was doing at Mount St. Joseph. Let's go get a hold of that. So that's really what that process has been like for us as we start with reverse engineering from where did we struggle to how do we fix it to who can help us take it to the next level.
I think I love hearing the process behind it, because to me, I'd say it was within the last year and a half or two that I started to think more about our systems, our mechanisms for making our system better, not just what the concepts were, but how we taught and studied it. And to me, I like that we have the grading system that is helping generate where our issues are and trying to find trends. I like the plus minus system. I think that's great. I like being able to look at all phases being examined, because I think something that I feel like when I was younger, you would hear more of, and it's still out there, but you'd hear more of, our guys can't do X, Y, Z. But to me, especially once you've been somewhere long enough, if your guys aren't doing it, I mean, at some point, it's you or me, right? Like at some point, I mean, so that hit me, and that's what kind of got us over the hump. So I think that all phases being examined, I think is great. And then getting to who you're going to study. And I think that if this is an education podcast, I'd say is you can hear how clear the process is. But I think even something that you and I always work a lot on is understanding what your base is and what you're actually trying to do, because that's going to start everything. And I think that when you're lost without a system or in between systems, or it's still a patchwork system, I think that's how you can get lost in the off season. And that's kind of an off script deal, but you transitioning this year and then having your own offense, like how did you find who you were and what your system was? Because I know I was in a la-la land for a while, and it took me after 5 years to figure out, okay, this is what we are. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, for me, especially early, a lot of it was like, it was grab baggy.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of us know the systems that we played in for the most part, right? And like, I was even a part of a time at Humboldt State where we transitioned from a very pro-style huddle, under center, two back, to more gun, to huddle, gun, to all the way out of the huddle, multiple tempo, like flirting with the NASCAR all the time kind of stuff. And so it was like, I had this really unique experience with all these different influences. Then I go start coaching at the high school level. And it's like, okay, every year at the high school level, and it's funny to hear guys like even Dub Maddox talk about this, because that guy's as system oriented as system gets, but your personnel is so different year to year at the high school level. You almost like start to go like, well, this year we were this and this year we were this, because that was the guys you had, right? It's not like in college where we just recruit the guys that fit our system and then boom, here we go. Even at our level, at the college level, we still have to build everything we do around our players. But what I started to realize pretty quick was, rather than just looking at concepts and saying, I really like that play. Ooh, that's nasty. I like that. Like, oh, we ran this and this was good for us when I played. It became less about the plays and more about almost the operating system. Like, how do I now systemize all of this into a language that is going to cover all of our bases to allow us to be flexible? How do I create this operating system that I can overlay almost to give us opportunities to be flexible when our personnel dictates it? And I think the other thing that, this is almost selfish in a way, but I always, and this is the same thing I think a lot of people would say when they get into coaching, is they want to be what they never had as a player when they're being coached. Like, they want to be that coach that they needed as a player. Well, I was blessed with really great coaches, but I wasn't blessed with elite athleticism. And as a wide receiver who was a walk-on guy at a Division II school, like, I wasn't going to go take the top off and run by everybody, but I did understand coverage and leverage. I did understand how to set guys up and how to win. And so as we started to dive into these tools of run and deep choice, option routes, receivers calling their RPO tags off of the leverage of a given defender based on the rules, like, that was really where I was trying to go with our system of creating opportunities for our players to hold the pen last, have the keys to the system, understand the rules. And that's our job as coaches, is to build the rules and the infrastructure and the architecture. And if we could give them these rules and then allow them an opportunity to always be able to go in, like, players, what more do you want, right? As a player, what more do you want than a coach that believes in you enough to give you agency to almost control your own destiny, as long as you do it within the structure of the system? And it's funny because you said, we can't do that, right? Like, I always chuckle about that because I used to go to strength conditioning clinics and present as a high school strength conditioning coach. And, we were using the Olympic lifts and the snatch and the clean and jerk. And I'd have guys come up to me and go, well, high school kids can't snatch. High school kids can't do the snatch. They can't learn that. They can't do the movement. And I said, well, it's funny because we have kids that are not only snatching, they're breaking state records and going to USA weightlifting nationals and winning medals. So they can. It's about, can we teach it? Can they learn it? And that's where that interplay of the coach-athlete relationship really has to be at the center of this thing.
Absolutely. And you're hearing the themes over and over, but it's the teaching element that keeps showing itself up. And that's where you're saying the systemization of language in the operating system. I think back to when I was early as a coordinator, and I don't even knew that was a thing. So I think that for guys going through that process, that really is an art. And to me, the way that I picked up on that was just hearing other guys talk about their system or talk about what they call just exposure, right? Because you play in a system, and you hear it, more exposure to that's going to give you, it'll allow you to see what you like and don't like. And now I'm assuming you're very similar, but as far as like a communication mechanism, like our plays, like you said, are going to change. Our personnel is going to change. The personnel is going to dictate how we operate those things. But what is the overview of what we do is the mentality and the operating system, the language, and those things. To me, that's where it all starts. I mean, I don't think I realized that as a young coach. I think that's really good insight. So one I think for your situation is really unique, and there's going to be a lot of coaches listening to this that they're experiencing the same thing to some degree. You went from being an OC, calling your deal, to the O-line coach, run game coordinator. So you're working directly with somebody else who's implementing it, right? What is the system that you use for tailoring new ideas that you have into something, that operating system that already exists? Because I think that is there's a fine line that you can walk. And I think you do it tactfully. And I think you guys did it very successfully this year based on the output. So if you can kind of talk to people about how you went about that, that'd be great.
Yeah. And none of that would be possible without an offensive coordinator and Ty Curry here at SOU that was open to that. And what was really unique in our situation here is Coach Brown brought me in real late because of the timing with the way the position opened. And I pulled my moving truck in here to Southern Oregon about the 1st of August, and we opened camp in a week from when we arrived. And so really it was like trying to ingest and fully understand the system that was in place, because if you don't understand the system that's in place, you don't have any insight as to how you can add anything to it or what it even needs, right? But at the end of the day, like it needs to be, and Coach Brown and our culture here at SOU, like the culture that Coach Brown has instilled here is one word, it's we. And if it isn't a we in planning this game plan from week to week, and if it isn't we, if it's just, hey, this is the system, this is what we do, we can't do anything else, then you can't bring any new ideas. So I'm really blessed to work with some guys who were excited to listen to new ideas and have dialogue and conversations. But for me, again, it all comes back to the operating system, right? Like, and I think a lot of this stems from my background in strength conditioning, because you're borrowing these ideas from all of these different influences and all these people who are experts in their field. And the way you really make it all work is finding how they fit together. And so, that's something that I've been fortunate to be able to be around since I was a student assistant in the strength department at Humboldt State. And so taking that same idea of here's these different ideas, all of which have merit, all of which have value, and all of which serve a very, very specific purpose, you really just use that constraints-led approach. Like, what are the constraints that we have within the system? Now, how do those impact the ability to implement any new additions, right? And then once you understand the system that's in place, at the end of the day, like, ball is ball, right? Like, inside zone is inside zone. Counter is counter, right? Empty pass protection is empty pass protection. And everybody's got different words for it, but the principles are the same. So now we need to build bridges from like, this is what exists to, if we look at something new, I think it's always important. And this is the same way we teach with our players is why, then what, then how. So why do we need this thing? Like if I'm going to bring up an idea, it can't just be because I think it's really a great idea. It's why do we need it? Okay, so here's why we need it. Now we have a basis to start this conversation. What are we trying to accomplish with it? Or what does it look like as a part of the whole? Because another thing we say here is it takes us all to make the one, right? So what are we trying to accomplish and what does it look like as we integrate it into the whole? And then the execution piece of this is how do we integrate it into the current system? Are we adding it as a collection of plays? Or are we integrating it into the current operating system? Do we even have the infrastructure to operate this concept? And then as we've just keep coming back to, right, like, how do we teach it? Because if we don't have a way to teach it, it doesn't matter how well it integrates in the system. It doesn't matter what we're trying to accomplish. It doesn't even matter why we need it. If we can't teach it, the players can't do it. And if the players can't execute it because we didn't teach it well enough, then we actually didn't get better by adding this thing. We just got worse. So that I think is really the way that we went about it. And again, I'm grateful to have some colleagues here who were open to having those discussions and trusted me to bring new ideas. And at the end of the day, we as an offense, we averaged 445 yards a game. We averaged 43 points a game. We were 98% efficient in the red zone. And the only time we weren't scoring the football in the red zone was when we were kneeling out a game to beat the number 4 team in the country. That for us was the biggest purpose is, can our players get this done? Does it give us an advantage? Does it make us better? And as long as we answer that why, that what, and how, and people are willing to come to the table and have a discussion and not be, this is what we do, we don't do anything else, then really it's not as hard as it might seem from the outside looking in.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway, that for new guys and experience alike is understanding that it is about integration, not just like insertion of, idea X, Y, or Z, because I think the more that a system becomes a system, and from my vantage point is the layers and the plays on plays that are occurring, and it's all being built off of a core idea. And then, like I tell guys, once the operating system in, so how you call it, how you communicate it, and the principles are outlined, I believe you can, if you have an open mind, you can take it where you need to take it. That to me is which I didn't understand as a young coach. So I really think that's really important. And then I think one thing I know you do is as well, but another thing I've thought about is to not only do we have to be able to teach it and teach it at a high level, like you mentioned, like elite coaches are elite teachers. Like that's just, that's how it goes. And then I think that the next layer to it that I try to consider is, okay, we have this idea going in. Can we correct it? which to me is in the study phase, in the teaching phase. Like, are you teaching? You and I we want answers to be displayed on the field for our guys, right? We want to have answers to the test. I think in my first year of coordinating, when I put plays in that were good plays and had success for us, once they got taken away, I did not know how to correct it. And that taught me early in my career that, and I've always thought about that, is can we correct this thing? And so kind of in that vein, when you are looking at, a concept that is already effective and you're looking to enhance it, how do you view that process?
I would say it goes back to that same why, what, how progression for us. Why was it good? Why was it good? Like, we're really blessed here at SOU. We had the nation's leading rusher at tailback, first team All-American tailback, right? We had 4 of our starting 5 offensive linemen were all conference players, right? Like, why was it good? Is it just because we had really good players, or is it because it's a good scheme, right? Is it because it was taught well and implemented correctly? But then the what is what gave it issues, right? I mean, I think your favorite question when you put a play up on the board or learn a new play is what stops it, right? That's the first question you always ask. So why was it good? What gives it issues? And then this next piece of how do we protect it or insulate it from the things that gave it issues? And I think what's even more important to ask, because we love ball plays and we're really eager to go put in a new answer, I think the most important question to wrap up that process is there something already in our system that allows us to protect it and insulate it? Because then it's just like, well, let's just get more reps of those things. Like, let's just keep getting reps of those things. So why was it good? What gave us issues? And then how do we protect or insulate it from the things that gave us issues? And hopefully there's already something in your system that does that for you. And if there isn't, well, that sounds like a pretty worthwhile investment.
This might sound goofy. I don't think it will to you, but if you've never done it, it might. But do you ever think about too, when you're going, okay, I'm trying to find these protections, especially if it's like a unique issue that you're having, some of the sim stuff, you know what I mean? I think you have to go outside the box to get like an answer that lets your kids still play free, right? But do you ever, after you've thought about, okay, we've gone what, why, what, how, and then another how I think about is how you get to it, which I think is your question of like, do we have it? Is it this new piece? Is it an addition to it? Is it a check? Like, I feel like that's something that I've often thought, like, how do we get to said play? And I think that you can get tripped up on that if you're not watching, if you're not careful for it.
And something that we played around with a little bit this year was having some kills and cans in the run game. Like, hey, we want to run mid-zone and we want to run it at the bubble. Well, we called it and the bubble's not there. Well, let's just have a mechanism to kill this thing. We know how to run it to the right and to the left. So we're not teaching anything new. We're just teaching the operating system of how to get it from running not at the bubble to getting it to a favorable look and running it to the bubble. Or, hey, we want to go ahead and we want to run, truck toss and we're going to pin pull and we're going to get condensed and we're going to pull guys out around the edge and get numbers. Well, they've got numbers to the edge. Well, out of this same formation, what run do we have that attacks the A gap? Well, let's just can it to that, or a man zone, or any of those things, right? So that's a little bit, NFL-y and having that pro style influence here. Like, we identify ourselves as a pro style spread offense, so that fits our infrastructure. But I always used to even have, when I was calling it on my call sheet, like a note of like, if they take this away, get to this, right? And whether I hand wrote it, whether I coded it with a color or a font, like, we knew, and we even talked about it in the meetings, their answer within their base structure from what they have shown us on film is they're going to go from this to get that number back or to solve a leverage issue. And as soon as they do that, expect this, like within the series or the very next series, like just know. And our guys would already know, like they'd start shaking their head. They'd see the play signaled in and like you'd see a grin or whatever, like, cause they knew. And so that's a little bit how we ended up going to that. And, for you and I that have had all these, deep dives into how do we even allow our players to be equipped to fix it? Because at the end of the day, like when you give them tools like running an option route, like freeing up the offensive line to make a pin and pull call, whenever the leverage dictates that's now advantageous for us in our wide or mid zone game, right? Or checking wide zone to down G against 3-4 Okie, like anything that our players can now we're getting that, in my opinion, is the secret sauce when I don't have to be the one to call it, right? And the pre-snap stuff, the kills and the cans, are phenomenal, but the defense gets to move too. So if they see us kill it or can it and they change the look, we can't just keep going back and forth and killing and canning it. We're going to run out of play clock or we're going to burn timeout. And so, that was really, we were a big check with me team for a long time, like speed to the ball, hard count, see the look, signal in a play. Well, when defenses were checking our checks, I'm like, well, this has now lost the sauce that we were looking for. How do we get it post snap? Like, how do we, like the ball snap, the call is in. Now our players get to go make us right. And at the end of the day, in a game of, who holds the pen last between the offensive and the defensive coordinator, we always said that when our players held the pen, then we were in a really good spot.
I agree with that. And I think that kind of goes into this question. When you're getting to this phase where we've collected this data, how do you walk the line of knowing what's too much? Like, how do you assess where that line presents itself?
And this goes back to my days teaching 6th grade PE, and my wife's also an elementary educator, which I know you can attest to as well. Like, as a father, behavior is communication. Behavior is communication. And so regardless of whether or not your players tell you, coach, we're good. Like, hey, guys, are you doing okay? Like, is this too much? Are we overwhelmed? Coach, we're good. Like, that's fine. Very seldom are you going to have a guy go, coach, this is feeling like a lot. And I have been grateful to coach some guys who will tell you the truth and do it in a respectful manner and do it for the betterment of the whole group. But your players are going to tell you with their execution what they understand. So understanding that behavior is communication, watch your players. And it's always important to have a base, understanding like going into spring ball, going into fall camp, like what's the base? What are we trying to get installed? What are our core concepts, whether it's in the run game, quick game, pass game, RPO, screen game, any of those things, right? What's our base? And then the group that you have will dictate how much beyond the base you can get to, right? Like there was a year where we had 23 formations and 13 different shifts and we didn't have any misalignment issues, pre-snap penalties, or any of those things. So 23 formations and 13 shifts, motions, that sounds like a lot, but your players will tell you sometimes it's only 5, right? And I can only say that because I've made that mistake with the install calendar. Like, hey, we met as a staff, we set the install calendar, this goes in on this day and it's followed by this and we're putting it in. Well, when we're watching the tape and our players can't get lined up, or we keep busting routes, or we keep MAing, as far as our IDs or our combos or our footwork, like something that we have to do, and I can only say this because I was the one who did it wrong, we have to be able to take a step back and say our players are telling us, they might not be verbalizing it, but their execution and their behavior is showing us they don't understand this. And ultimately that's on us because we have to coach it, we have to teach it, and we have to see it and be insightful enough to see that they don't understand. We need to press pause. We need to maybe take a step back. Let's make sure we're good on the base and then move forward. And that's where I've found is like the line is different every year. You have to flirt with that line. You have to be comfortable pushing that line, but you can only be comfortable and aggressive pushing that line if you're going to be just as, for lack of a better word, empathetic of your players when they're showing you that you've stepped over it, to take a step back, reevaluate, and then keep it pushing.
No, I think that's great. And I think the thing I would say to how you're explaining that is no matter what, if you're in year 1 of coaching or year 1 of coordinating, or you're going into year 10, is you can't skip steps, right? Like the base is the base. And I think for me personally, knowing that the level of success that occurred in year 7 at a place was at our height is understanding in a new spot that you're resetting to 0. But I also think that one thing that we did was even after our initial breakthrough in 2022, we reset to 0 after that, returning the entire offense. And the kids thought I was crazy, but I said, we're going back to building from 0. It might not take us as long, but we'll build from this deal. And then I'll even, to your point of like behavior is that is telling you what's going on. I'm notorious for setting the install, and we do a 1A, 1B deal where we're teaching basically the same concept a couple different ways, but we're getting 2 days worth of a concept. I'm notorious for, if I feel like we are getting overloaded and things are starting to strain, I'll pause the install and I'll highlight it in a color pink or something like that. We're like, hey, this is on tap. We're pausing it until further notice. And it might be a day later. It might be 2. And that sometimes can like pain you because you're like, oh, I have to have this. I have to have this bunch concept. But to me, it has always ended better when we paused and reset or just refocused on what we're already doing and then let the kids go there. So I think that no one ever taught me that. And I feel like that's not something that people talk about, but I think that's a real thing. If you want execution, you ever do that? You ever pause it like legit, like, hey, we're not putting this in today?
There was a day that I vividly remember in our first spring at Luther College in the spring of 22. And we had broken our spring install day 1, spring install day 2, day 3, all install 1. It's install 1, day 1, install 1, day 2, install 1, day 3. We were teaching hey, we're 2x2 in day 1, we're 3x1 in day 2, we're empties, exotics, bunches, quads, all the fun, motion, everything in day 3. And we were giving them an install packet in the meetings. And then one day they walk in, they go, Coach, where's our install packet? I was like, well, we didn't earn it. Like our execution on this day, we were below 50% in execution. So we will not move forward until we are 80% plus for every player on every snap that we have on film. We go through another practice and they look at me and I go, nope, not today, boys. And then we go a third day. And then at the end of the practice, like everybody comes up and there's, I don't know. And I go, you get a new install packet tomorrow. And the whole unit thought, we just won a ball game. It was awesome because one, it showed they care. Behaviors, communication, right? Like they earned a new install. And that moment is very, very vivid in my mind. And that was a day that confirmed that pausing the install is fruitful. We ended up catching up. We got everything in that we wanted to that spring. And those 2 days didn't kill us, even though it was killing me to not move on. But it was better to pause it, get it right, and then go do the work, right? That's a Brian Kite. Press pause, get your mind right, do the work. Right? That was what we had to do.
I think that's fantastic. I think it just shows the focus on the teaching piece and the connection piece and understanding your guys, meeting them where they're at. All critical things, all things I think you do well. I think we could go for another 50 some minutes, but I want to make sure, again, I reiterate, to me, Tim, what you represent is, I'm sure people are going to hear from this, is there's a passion for the game and learning and teaching that shines through. Your intrigue is high level. I think that's always shined through to me. The energy, you even have the strength and conditioning voice going right now, and the energy is flowing through there. I know you're about to go to another session right after this. Not only is there energy, but to me, you represent positivity, which I believe people are always trying to. It's a magnetic force. It's going to pull you to you. And I know that even if I'm down and you call, it's going to be a positive talk. Even if you're down and you call me, it's still going to be positive. And it is an incredible thing that I do not know how you do it, but I respect. I believe you're well versed in the game of football, the knowledge and the things you're studying. In this podcast, you can hear the teaching, the systems, the flows, the processes, the looking inside as much as you are outward. I think that's all there. And last but not least, through my experiences, we're going on a year now knowing each other, just an elite human. And to me, someone that represents a student of the game, but is a guy that's promoting the game in the right way. But I really appreciate you just being able to come on here. But I just want you to know, like, that's what I think about you when it comes to who you are. And that's 1 year of knowing you. So let's see what year 2 does.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much. And yeah, 1 year down and who knows how far to go. But at the end of the day, I'm really grateful for this connection and relationship. And that's what this whole thing's about. We're in a people business. It's about relationships. And those are the things that bring the most joy and fruitfulness to my life. That's why I'm so grateful for this game.
Love it. Tim, appreciate you, brother.
Thank you again for listening to the Coach and Coordinator podcast. As you've noticed, we now have a series of podcasts on the Coach and Coordinator Network. We're really excited about this series approach and what each different host brings to us. Plus, we have some roundtables, which essentially are hostless podcasts, starting with Think Tank. We recorded that first Think Tank with Dan Gonzalez, Dub Maddox, and Josh Herring, and I'll tell you, it was so detailed. and so good in what they put into it. I know you're going to enjoy that series as well as all the other series we have on the Coach and Coordinator Network. Be sure to follow all of our sponsors currently that Signature Championship rings, Modern Football Technology, and Titan GPS. Check out our 10% toolkit where we highlight all of our partners and what they have available to you, as well as some special offers. The link to that is in the show notes. Check out our enhanced show notes at coachandcoordinator.com. We'll be adding content that works better on video or as a download. And follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.